My name is Ruth, and I am 58 years old. For the past 3 decades, my entire existence, my purpose, my quiet joy, and my hidden worries have orbited around two fixed points: the cherished fading star of my late husband Michael's memory, and the vibrant, demanding planets of our two children, David and Amanda. That familiar cosmos shattered on a cool Tuesday evening last October. I remember the exact texture of the moment. I was at my kitchen table, the one with the faint ring stain from a forgotten glass years ago, carefully tucking a crisp $20 bill into a birthday card I'd made myself for my grandson Noah. I'd drawn a lopsided train on the front because he loved trains. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, warming the worn wood and bathing everything in a honeyed, peaceful glow. A deep, settled contentment hummed within me. I had done it. Through all the lonely years since Michael left us, I had kept my promise. I had held our little family together, a one-woman gravity well. Then my phone buzzed, a harsh vibration on the quiet wood. A text notification lit up the screen. It was in the group thread David had created years ago, ironically named the Miller family. His message was brief, devoid of any emoji or warmth. "Mum, we need to have a family meeting tomorrow night at my house. It's important. 7 p.m. Sharp." I read it twice. The tone was so cold, so formal, so utterly foreign coming from my firstborn. It felt like a sudden, icy draft cutting through that warm, golden room. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It seemed to stutter and sink. A family meeting. We never had family meeting. We had Sunday dinners, we had quick calls, we had visits filled with Noah's laughter. Meetings were for corporate offices and homeowner associations. That was the precise moment I now see the very first tight thread in the fabric of my life began to snap. Before I pull back the curtain on what happened in that perfectly decorated dining room, the confrontation that reshaped the landscape of my heart forever, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt deep in your bones that your love was just an entry on someone else's balance sheet? That your sacrifices had become so expected, they turned invisible? If that quiet ache is familiar to you, please type yes in the comments below. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from today. And if you're new here to these stories of hard-won peace, please consider hitting that subscribe button. You're not just subscribing to a channel, you're joining a circle of folks who believe it's never too late to rewrite your own story. What came next for me was the most painful and ultimately the most freeing lesson I never wanted to learn. The following day unfolded with a strange underwater quality. I tried to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of my work, reconciling accounts for a gentle elderly dentist named Dr. Feldman. But the columns of numbers on my screen blurred and danced. My focus was hijacked by a single looping question. What was so urgent? What warranted a meeting? Vague, terrifying possibilities flitted through my mind. Was Noah sick? Was there trouble between David and Chloe? Had someone lost a job? The unknown was a heavy weight on my chest. By 2 in the afternoon, I surrendered to the anxiety. I closed my accounting software, my mind made up. If this was a confrontation, I would not arrive empty-handed. I drove to the little German bakery on Maple Avenue, the one that still made apple pie from scratch with a lattice crust, just like David loved when he was a boy. The comforting smell of cinnamon and baked dough usually soothed me, but today it felt like a relic from a different time. Next, I went to the florist. Amanda had always loved sunflowers. She said they were bold and happy. I chose a small, bright bouquet, their faces turned upward, oblivious. They were peace offerings, I told myself firmly, for a war I hadn't started and didn't understand, loading my quiet symbols of truce into the passenger seat. I nearly bumped into Evelyn, my neighbour, as she emerged from her own car, grocery bags in hand. At 72, Evelyn possessed the clear-eyed, unsentimental wisdom of a woman who had buried a husband, raised three strong daughters alone, and had zero tolerance for nonsense. "Ruth, honey, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her gaze missing nothing as it took in my strained face and the purposeful purchases. "Just a family thing tonight at David's." I said the words, feeling flimsy. "A meeting." Evelyn set her bags down on her driveway with a soft thud. "A meeting." She repeated the word, sitting heavily in the space between us. She wiped her hands on her jeans. "I saw that new luxury SUV of his last week. Shiny as a new dime. Must have cost a pretty penny. And Amanda's Instagram. All those pictures from that fancy spa resort in Sedona last month. Looked like $1 million. She paused, her eyes softening with a concern that made my defenses rise. "Just go in there with both eyes wide open, sweetheart. Sometimes when you spend a lifetime feeding the birds, they forget how to forage. They just keep opening their beaks, waiting for the next handout." A sharp retort sprang to my lips. "They're not birds, Evelyn. They're my children. They're successful. They probably want to discuss starting a college fund for Noah. It's a positive thing." I said it with a conviction I desperately wanted to feel. Evelyn simply reached out and gave my forearm a gentle, knowing squeeze. "I hope you're right," she said softly, but her expression held a pity I refused to acknowledge. "I hope with all my heart you're right." The drive to David's suburb took me on the old route past the turnoff for our former neighborhood. I couldn't help but glance down the street toward the little blue ranch house with the big oak tree in the front yard. The tree Michael planted when we moved in. The phantom sounds of childhood laughter seemed to echo from its branches. My promise to him whispered in a sterile hospital room as he slipped away, thrummed in my veins. "I'll be both of us, Michael. I'll make sure they never want for anything. They'll always have a soft place to land." It was a vow that had shaped every financial decision, every sacrifice for 30 years. I pulled into David's driveway, the tires crunching on the immaculate gravel. His house, a starkly modern structure of glass and pale stone, always felt a little too perfect, a little too cool. My contribution to its down payment had been my way of giving him a strong start. Seeing it now, I felt a prickle of something alien, not pride, but a faint unease. I gathered my pie and my sunflowers, their cheerful absurdity suddenly glaring, and rang the bell. Chloe answered. My sweet, usually warm daughter-in-law looked pale, her smile a thin, tense line. "Ruth, hi. Come in." She took the pie from me, her fingers brushing mine cold. "They're waiting in the dining room," she said, her voice low. Then, almost as an afterthought, she called up the stairs. "Noah, Grandma's here." My grandson came thundering down a whirlwind of 3-year-old energy and wrapped his sticky arms around my legs. "Grandma, I drawed a dinosaur." The simple, pure love in that hug was a balm. But Chloe quickly extracted him. "Okay, baby, upstairs for your bath now. Say goodnight." She herded him away, throwing an apologetic glance over her shoulder that did nothing to settle my nerves. I was left alone in the cavernous, echoey foyer. The house was silent, sterile, smelling of lemony polish and newness. It felt like a model home, not a place where life was lived. Squaring my shoulders, I walked toward the formal dining room. David and Amanda were already seated at opposite ends of the long, imposing table. There was no setting for me, no glass of water, just the severe lines of the furniture, David's tablet glowing ominously before him, and Amanda, who couldn't meet my eyes, fiddling with the sleeve of her expensive-looking sweater. The atmosphere was thick with a dread formality. "Hello, Mother," David said, not rising. The use of mother instead of mum was a subtle, chilling shift. "Please sit down." I understood then with a sinking certainty. This was not a family gathering. This was a board meeting, and I was the agenda item. David, ever the efficient executive, bypassed any pretense of casual conversation. He placed a deliberate finger on his tablet, and the screen brightened. Mom, Amanda and I asked you here tonight because after considerable reflection and discussion, we've identified some persistent, unhealthy patterns in our family system, he began. His voice was calm, measured the same tone I'd heard him use on conference calls through his study door. It was devoid of the warmth I associated with my son. We've come to realize that certain dynamics have fostered a state of codependency that is stifling for everyone involved. The clinical term codependency landed in the quiet room with the weight of a diagnosis. I felt a flutter of panic in my throat. Amanda nodded vigorously, her expression one of grave therapeutic concern. We've been working through a lot of this in our individual therapy sessions, she added, as if invoking the word therapy was a shield that rendered all criticism invalid. David continued, his gaze fixed on the tablet. To facilitate a healthier path forward, we believe radical honesty is necessary. So I've taken the initiative to compile some objective data. He turned the screen to face me. It displayed a meticulously crafted spreadsheet. Rows and columns, dates and amounts, all neatly formatted. For a dizzying second, the numbers swam before my eyes. David. I managed my voice sounding thin and far away. What is this? This, he stated, his finger tracing down a column, is a comprehensive ledger of the financial support you've provided to Amanda and me over the last 5 years, fully itemized and categorized. I forced my eyes to focus. Line by line, it was all there, but seen through a distorted lens. The $8,000 for Amanda's first adult apartment was not a helping hand for my daughter pursuing her dreams in the city. It was an enabling transfer. The $1,200 for David's car repair was not a parent saving their son from being stranded. It was a non-essential subsidy. The $3,000 to pay off Amanda's emergency credit card bill from a weekend shopping trip to Los Angeles was listed as a bailout. Even the $5,000 I'd gifted them last year for a family vacation to Disney World, a joyful sacrifice I'd made to see Noah's face light up, was coldly recorded as a discretionary family expense. He had logged every birthday check, every Christmas envelope of cash, every just because transfer for Noah's needs. My love, my careful planning, my sleepless nights of budgeting had all been data mined and quantified. I don't understand. I stammered, a hot flush of shame creeping up my neck. I thought I was helping. I wanted your lives to be easier, to have opportunities. That's what a parent does. David sighed, a long, weary exhalation that spoke of immense patience strained by my emotional illiteracy. That's the core of the issue, Mum. You've made it too easy. Your constant financial interventions, however well-intentioned, are a form of enabling. They prevent us from developing true fiscal responsibility and the resilience that comes from solving our own problems. This pattern of generosity. He paused, searching for the right corporate jargon. It's creating a significant imbalance in our relational equity. I looked from his earnest, frowning face, so like his father's, yet so utterly alien in this moment, to Amanda's supportive, solemn nodding. The ground beneath my feet, the very foundation of my identity as a mother, turned to quicksand. I was being formally reviewed and found deficient for the crime of loving them too much, for honoring the promise I made to their dying father. Amanda leaned forward, her hands clasped as if in prayer. It's not just about the money, Mum. It's the emotional baggage that comes with it. Every gift, every check, it feels like it has these invisible strings, these expectations. We feel this immense crushing guilt. We can't truly breathe or live our own lives under the weight of your investment in us. I stared at her, this beautiful, sharp-edged young woman, whose art school tuition I had paid by taking on extra tax returns, whose first professional portfolio I had financed. Expectations, I echoed, bewildered. My only expectation was your happiness, your safety, your well-being. David cut in his voice, taking on an edge of frustration. See that right there? That's the emotional leverage. We can't be responsible for your happiness, Mum. We can't live our lives trying to generate a return on your financial and emotional capital. It makes the relationship feel transactional. The word transactional sliced through the room, clean and cruel. My love, the careful allocation of my widow's pension, the extra hours of freelance bookkeeping I'd taken on when my back ached, all of it was being branded a business deal gone sour. I looked down at my own hands twisted together in my lap. These were the hands that had held them. When they were sick, braided Amanda's hair, steadied David as he learned to ride a bike. Now, in this cold, bright room, they felt like the hands of a clumsy creditor, fumbling with an overdue bill. The air grew thick, becoming difficult to pull into my lungs. I took a slow, deliberate breath, pulling the air deep into my diaphragm, the way I used to before tackling a complex tax return. The initial wave of vertiginous shock began to recede, replaced by a familiar, cold clarity. The bookkeeper in me, the part that sought order in chaos and truth in numbers, surfaced from the emotional wreckage. All right, I said, my voice emerging steadier than I felt. I see you've conducted a thorough audit. So what is the proposed corrective action, David? What is the strategic objective of this analysis? I gestured toward the glowing tablet. My shift in tone seemed to relax him. He mistook my chilling calm for professional understanding. He sat back slightly in his chair. We believe the time has come for a full organizational reset, he said, a hint of relief in his voice. Clear, firm boundaries. Phase 1 is the immediate and complete cessation of all non-essential financial support. No more bailouts, no more gifts that function as shadow obligations. Amanda jumped in her voice, adopting the bright, persuasive tone she used in her influencer videos. Yes, we need you to make a paradigm shift in how you see us. We're not your children to be rescued anymore. We're autonomous, fully realized adults. We require space, financial and emotional space to cultivate our own growth and accountability. I nodded slowly, as if carefully considering a business proposal. I understand the boundary concept. And what is the envisioned operational structure for me within this new entity? This was the question they had rehearsed for. David and Amanda exchanged a swift, loaded glance. He cleared his throat, a nervous habit he'd had since boyhood. Well, to optimally support this new chapter for all stakeholders, and to ensure your own long-term security in a more age-appropriate and manageable asset, we've been running some projections. He swiped on his tablet, bringing up a glossy photograph. It was a real estate listing for a one-bedroom condominium in a vibrant, active adult community called The Oaks, located a 30-minute drive further out from the city. The furniture in the staged photo was beige and impersonal. We strongly feel you should consider divesting from the house. It's a depreciating asset with high maintenance overhead. The current market conditions are ideal for a seller. The equity release would more than facilitate a move to a turnkey solution like this, with built-in social amenities and zero-yard liability. A cold so profound it felt like ice forming in my veins began to spread from my core. My house. The last place Michael had kissed me goodbye in the morning. The home where every scuff on the floor held a memory, where his favorite chair still sat by the window. They wanted me to sell my museum of love, my archive of our family, and move into a beige box. And the residual equity, I asked, my voice now as flat and cold as the tablet's screen. David looked at me with an expression of pure, benign fiduciary duty. That capital could be strategically redeployed, perhaps into a 529 plan for Noah's future education, or to help Amanda and me deleverage some of our own long-term investment positions. It would be a powerful way to symbolize this transition from a model of dependency to a legacy of empowered intergenerational planning. The breathtaking audacity of it, wrapped in the sterile language of finance, left me momentarily speechless. They wanted to liquidate my home, my sanctuary, and use the proceeds to fund their own comfort and credit scores, all while framing it as them helping me and fostering my independence. A slow, tectonic anger began to burn through the icy shock in my stomach, a righteous fire I hadn't felt in decades. And my role, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My position on the org chart of this new entity. Where does mother fit? Where does grandma report? David's face tightened with visible impatience at my emotional recalcitrance. Mom, this isn't about eliminating your role. It's about restructuring it. Removing the financial layer will allow the authentic relational layer to flourish. But it was Amanda who detonated. She shoved her chair back, the legs screeching like a wounded animal on the polished hardwood. You're not listening. You're doing it again right now with the guilt and the emotional blackmail. Her voice was a raw, piercing shriek in the silent house. You think writing checks and buying our affection makes you family? That subsidizing our lives purchases you a seat at this table? That's not love. That's a transaction. A sick, manipulative transaction. She was pointing a trembling finger toward the foyer, her face a mask of furious, entitled anguish. Maybe you should just leave. Maybe you need to get out and leave until you can get your head around what real family is. David didn't admonish her. He didn't tell her to stop. He simply looked at me, his silence a deafening, thunderous endorsement. Chloe was conspicuously absent, no doubt hiding upstairs with Noah bearing silent witness to the dismantling of her husband's mother. I was utterly, completely alone. In my son's expensive house at my daughter's hysterical command. The entire architecture of my life, built beam by beam on sacrifice and love, collapsed inward in that instant, leaving nothing but dust and echoing silence. There was a silence, then, that was more than an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. I could hear the low, steady hum of the sub-zero refrigerator in the kitchen, a sound of obscene normalcy. From upstairs, the faint, cheerful splash of Noah's bathwater continued a cruel counterpoint to the devastation in the dining room. I made myself look at my children, not through the filter of memory or hope, but with a brutal, newfound clarity. I saw the man in the tailored shirt and the watch that likely cost more than my monthly pension, coolly strategizing the liquidation of my deepest emotional asset. I saw the woman in the designer blouse, her manicured hand still pointing to the door, screaming that my lifetime of care was a vulgar commerce. These were not the children whose sticky hands I'd held crossing the street. They were sophisticated strangers who viewed me as a problematic line item on their life's balance sheet, an emotional liability to be managed. All the invisible sacrifices, the years of eating leftovers, so I could send them fun money, the dresses I didn't buy, so Amanda could have the perfect prom gown, the endless extra hours during tax season to help with David's wedding costs, rose up in my throat, a bitter tide of wasted devotion. And then something remarkable happened. A profound, almost supernatural calm descended upon me. It was as if a protective, soundproof chamber sealed around my heart. The pain was still there, a vast, desolate landscape, but it was now held at a distance, observable, manageable. I looked at the apple pie I'd brought sitting untouched in its bakery box, like a pathetic monument to my obsolete brand of motherhood. With a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to happen in a dream, I reached out and pushed the pie plate across the gleaming table toward the center. The soft scrape of cardboard on wood was the only sound a period at the end of a long, run-on sentence. I placed my palms flat on the cool surface, feeling the solidity of it, and pushed myself to my feet. My body obeyed, steady and strong. I looked at David, his face a mixture of confusion and lingering irritation. I looked at Amanda, still standing, her chest heaving with spent rage. And then I did the thing that seemed to disarm them more than any tears or shouts ever could. I smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy or amusement. It was a smile of absolute piercing clarity, a smile of final recognition and farewell. It said, "I see you now fully, and with this sight, my work here is finished." Without uttering a single syllable, I turned my back on them. My footsteps were muffled on the expensive Persian runner in the hall. I opened the heavy, polished front door, stepped out into the crisp, liberating darkness of the autumn night, and pulled it closed behind me. The latch engaged with a soft, definitive click that echoed in the still air. No one called my name. No footsteps followed me. I slid into my 10-year-old sedan, the upholstery worn comfortable, and started the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove, that strange, serene smile still on my face, a silent lighthouse in the shipwreck of my former life. I arrived home. Not the house, but home. The modest, slightly shabby ranch with Michael's stubborn rose bushes clinging to life by the front walk, their last blooms glowing like pale ghosts in the porch light. I didn't turn on the overhead lights in the living room, letting the familiar shapes of my furniture comfort me in the gloom. I walked, guided by memory and a deep new purpose, straight to my small office. The room that had been Michael's study, still faintly smelling of his old pipe tobacco and leather-bound books. I flicked on the green-shaded desk lamp, its warm, focused pool of light, a familiar and calming anchor. I booted up my sturdy desktop computer, the machine that held the financial lives of my clients, orderly and precise. I opened a new spreadsheet file. For a long, still moment, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Then, with a decisive click, I began to type the title at the top: Personal Ledger, Closure and Reconciliation. I created 2 separate worksheets. The first I labeled Tangible Disbursements. Here, with the dispassionate accuracy that was my professional hallmark, I entered every item from David's damning list. But I didn't stop there. I opened my own bank records, my old checkbook registers. I added the 6 months of mortgage payments I'd covered for Amanda after her graduation, when she was finding herself. I input the $15,000 I'd provided as down payment assistance for David's showplace of a house, money I'd told myself was an investment in his future. I listed the cost of the airline tickets to visit them last Christmas, the hotel stay, the piles of gifts under their tree. I calculated a fair market rate for the hundreds of hours of babysitting I'd provided for Noah, not as a grandmother's privilege, but as a professional service that had allowed Chloe to return to work and David to travel for his career. I accounted for the interest-free loans that were never formalized, never repaid. When I finished, I ran the sum formula. The total that appeared in the bottom cell was a number that stole my breath. It was not a king's ransom, but it represented the careful hoarding of a widow's security, the erosion of my own financial cushion, all transferred into their lives. The second worksheet I titled Intangible Capital and Opportunity Cost. This was the harder, more painful ledger. Here, I did not deal in dollars, but in pieces of my life. I created bullet points: career capital, declined full-time partnership track at Henderson & Gray CPA firm, with benefits 401k match to maintain flexible schedule for family support. Personal development capital, deferred all post-Michael grief counseling, travel, social reinvestment. No pursuit of new hobbies, relationships, or educational interests. Emotional and physical capital. Chronic stress from financial juggling, sleep deprivation from worry, constant mental labor of anticipating and planning for their needs. Legacy dreams. Trip to Ireland to scatter Michael's ashes per his wish. Pottery class. Writing family memoir for Noah. I did not assign monetary value to these items. Their weight was in their truth. They were the hidden subsidies, the silent bleed of a life lived exclusively for others. I sat back in my creaky desk chair, the blue light of the twin screens reflected in my glasses. The bookkeeper in me. The analyst saw the story, the numbers told with brutal simplicity. The enterprise was hopelessly insolvent. The returns. A fleeting sense of being needed, occasional photos of my grandchildren. The hollow title of Mom were catastrophically negative when weighed against the expenditure of my entire self. It was the worst managed portfolio imaginable, and the board had just issued a unanimous vote of no confidence. I picked up my phone. It was after 10 o'clock. I dialed Evelyn's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert with concern. Ruth, everything all right? In a flat, unemotional monotone, I narrated the events of the evening. The meeting, the spreadsheet, the condo proposition. Amanda's screaming indictment, my silent, smiling exit. I listed the facts as if reading from a police report. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then Evelyn's voice came through firm and clear as a bell. All right then, honey. It's time. It's past time. You need to balance the books for you, not for their approval, for your own survival. Close out the accounts. Her words were the final permission I didn't know I needed. Thank you, Ev, I whispered and hung up. I began to work methodically through the night. First, a call to the credit card company. The Platinum card, where David was an authorized user for family emergencies. I cancelled it, effective immediately, citing suspected misuse. I initiated an immediate electronic transfer of every last cent from the joint savings account I'd naively shared with Amanda for convenience into my sole private money market account. I logged into my retirement investment portal, a portfolio I'd built slowly and carefully, and changed all beneficiary designations. David and Amanda, formerly listed as 50-50 beneficiaries, were removed. In their place, I named a charitable trust I would establish in Michael's memory. Then the most difficult action. I drafted a detailed email to my attorney, Frank Bendix, requesting an urgent appointment first thing in the morning to revise my entire estate plan. The old will, written in the fog of fresh grief, left the house and all residual assets to the children. The new instructions were clear. The house was to be placed in a trust. Upon my passing, it would be sold, and the proceeds would fund an annual scholarship for a non-traditional student, a returning parent, a veteran at the local community college in Michael's name. The remainder would be bequeathed to the no-kill animal shelter where I volunteered. A separate, irrevocable educational trust would be created for Noah, accessible only for accredited educational expenses when he turned 25 with a trusted third party. I was thinking of Evelyn's most level-headed daughter, an attorney as trustee, not his parents. By 3 a.m, the digital and legal severance was complete. The financial umbilical cord, which they had claimed to want to cut, but had really wanted to control, was not just cut, it was cauterized. I felt a profound exhaustion, a hollowed-out sensation. But beneath it, thrumming like a new engine, was a grim, unshakable sense of agency. The ledger was under new management. The calls began the next morning at 8:45, just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. The spreadsheet still open on my screen like a declaration of independence. The first was from Amanda. Her voice was a frantic, high-pitched wail in my ear, devoid of any semblance of the composed adult from the night before. Mum, what did you do? My card was declined at SoulCycle. In front of everyone, I had to just walk out. Is there fraud on your account? Did something happen? I took a slow, deliberate sip of coffee, gazing out the kitchen window at the backyard where Michael's rose bushes stood defiant in the morning light. No, Amanda. My accounts are perfectly secure. The ledger, as we discussed, is now balanced. That card was linked to my account. You are an independent adult, as you so passionately articulated last night. You'll need to use your own financial resources to fund your lifestyle choices. There was a sputtering, incredulous silence on the line. Then the panic mutated into pure, unfiltered rage. You're punishing us for being honest, for wanting a healthy relationship. This is so abusive, so toxic and manipulative. I listened to the torrent saying nothing, watching a sparrow land on the bird feeder. When her tirade paused, likely for breath, I said quietly, calmly, I am respecting your explicitly stated request for financial and emotional space. I truly hope you find your next yoga class more fulfilling. Then I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with David's name. His tone was a masterclass in aggrieved, condescending disappointment. Mom, this is beyond irresponsible. We need to de-escalate and talk about this rationally. Your reaction is completely disproportionate. We were engaging in a difficult but necessary dialogue about boundaries, and you've chosen to have an emotional meltdown. You can't unilaterally make these drastic financial decisions. What about Noah's preschool tuition? The payment is auto-drafted next week. The sheer tactical weaponization of my grandson. The assumption that my love for him was a lever they could pull, transformed the last remnants of my aching heart into something hard and diamond bright. I have every confidence that you and Chloe, as the independent, capable adults you profess to be, have a sound financial plan for your son's education. I said, my voice as cool and smooth as Riverstone. My contributions were a privilege I extended, not a contractual obligation. Last night's meeting made that distinction abundantly, painfully clear to me. He was silent for a long beat. I could almost hear him recalculating. You're really going to follow through with this? He finally spat, his voice dripping with incredulous fury. After everything we shared about building a more authentic relationship, I looked at the stark numbers on my computer screen, the record of my depletion. I am simply implementing the new operating framework you both designed, David. To the letter. Goodbye. I placed the phone gently on the counter. It rang again almost immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, I listened. It was Chloe. Her voice was thick with unshed tears, shaky with remorse. Ruth, it's Chloe. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I didn't agree with any of it. The meeting, the demand about the house. It was awful. I was scared. Please don't hate us. Noah asks for you every day. He doesn't understand. I saved the message. I did not call back that day or the next. The fallout was a radioactive cloud, and I needed to remain in my shelter of calm a little while longer. Their outrage, their panic, their attempts at guilt. They were my final validation. They hadn't desired independence. They had desired sovereignty. They wanted the river of support to flow forever. But with me politely relegated to the banks, grateful for whatever droplets of attention or access they allowed. They had made a critical error in judgment. They had mistaken a mother's boundless love for a permanent weakness. They forgot that long before I was Ruth, the mother, I was Ruth the bookkeeper. And a good bookkeeper always knows when an account is bleeding out and how to staunch the flow. Time, as it always does, began its work of erosion and reshaping. The sharp, jagged pain of that night did not vanish, but it weathered, softening at the edges, becoming a familiar ache. I learned to carry like an old injury that acts up before the rain. I did not allow myself to curdle into bitterness. I consciously chose to become a different woman, to build a new life from the rubble of the old. I honored the communication boundary I'd set, responding to their infrequent strained emails about logistical matters, health insurance forms, a question about a childhood photo, with polite brief and emotionally neutral replies. I did not discuss feelings. I did not discuss money. I focused all my energy on populating the new ledger of my lifeline by positive line. Evelyn became my stalwart companion and reality check. Our Tuesday morning coffees evolved into a sacred ritual. She never once uttered, "I told you so," which is the rarest and truest form of friendship. She simply listened, offered her sharp wit, and reminded me of my own strength when I faltered. I doubled my volunteer shifts at the Paws and Hearts animal shelter. There I found a profound, wordless solace, bathing a scared rescue dog, cleaning kennels, filling food bowls. It was work that asked for nothing but kindness and offered pure, unconditional gratitude in return. It was a healing balm for a soul that felt bankrupted by conditional love. Then, on a grey Wednesday, filled with a restless energy, I called the administration office of the local high school. I asked tentatively if they ever needed volunteer tutors for mathematics. The woman on the phone nearly cried with relief. So every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I traded my quiet home office for a buzzing, sunlit classroom after the final bell. I worked with teenagers who struggled with the alien language of algebra and the intimidating proofs of geometry. In their frustrated sighs and sudden brilliant aha moments, I rediscovered a part of myself I had buried: the patient teacher, the problem solver, the woman who found joy in creating order from chaos. "Thanks, Ms. Ruth," a shy girl named Letitia said after finally graphing a quadratic equation correctly. That simple phrase, "Ms. Ruth," given with respect for me, not for what I could provide, filled a chamber of my heart that had been dark and cobwebbed for 30 years. The most significant entry in my new ledger was the trip. I took the money I was no longer funneling into my children's lives, the equivalent of a modest car payment every month, and I booked a cross-country road trip. I packed a single suitcase, a small cooler, and a framed photograph of Michael, the one from our wedding where he looked so young and hopeful. I drove west. I drove to the Grand Canyon because he had always wanted to see it. I arrived at the South Rim just as the afternoon sun began its descent. I stood there, a small solitary figure on the edge of that impossible vastness, the ancient layered rock stretching out in every direction, painted in hues of orange-purple and deep shadowy red. The sheer scale of geological time of endurance silenced the noisy clamor in my mind. And then I cried. I cried great heaving sobs that came from a place deeper than grief. I cried for Michael, for the love story cut short. I cried for the young mother I had been so full of fierce, protective love. I cried for the years I had lost to a one-sided devotion. And then, as the wind, constant and cleansing, swept across the canyon, it dried my tears. I felt infinitesimally small, yet for the first time I felt authentically part of something immense, beautiful and enduring that asked nothing of me but my witness. While I was away, a letter forwarded by a vigilant Evelyn arrived at my house. The envelope was addressed in the wonderfully clumsy large print of a small child. Inside was a drawing on construction paper. In bright crayon, it depicted a large stick figure with a triangular dress and a scribble of grey curls holding hands with a smaller stick figure with a radiant red smile. Beneath it, in letters that wandered up and down, it said, "Miss you, Grandma." It was signed with Noah's sprawling, triumphant N. Chloe had clearly helped, but the impulse, the love, was his. This time the tears that came were not of devastation, but of a profound, bittersweet release. He was the one pure, uncorrupted thread connecting me to that old life. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd received the text that started it all, and I wrote him a long letter. I described the painted desert, the strange tall cacti, the funny roadrunner birds. I told him about the canyon and how it made me think of how big and wonderful the world is. I tucked a carefully pressed desert wildflower between the pages. I addressed it to Chloe at her office, a neutral ground. The lesson, when it finally settled into the marrow of my bones, was not about severance or spite. It was about the fundamental economics of love. Authentic love is not a debt instrument. It is not an equity to be traded. It is a gift offered freely from a place of abundance. But a gift to have meaning requires a recipient who recognizes it as such, who receives it with gratitude, not entitlement. Without that reciprocity, the act of giving becomes a depletion, a slow, silent hemorrhage of the soul. I had to learn the hardest lesson of my 58 years, to stop giving to those who saw my offerings as mere entitlements. I had to learn painfully and from scratch how to give to myself, to invest in Ruth, to fund her dreams, her peace, her simple pleasures. The serenity that grew from that realization was deeper and more solid than any fleeting pride I'd ever felt in my children's accomplishments. It was the profound peace of a balanced ledger, where my own peace of mind, my own early morning coffee in silence, my own unencumbered choices were no longer liabilities, scribbled in the margins, but the core appreciating assets of my existence. So to all of you listening to my voice right now, I want to pose a question, one that comes from a place of hard-won understanding. Have you ever had to close the books on a relationship, be it with family, a friend, or a partner that was costing you more than you could sustainably afford? Not just in money, but in your peace, your self-respect, your very spirit. If you have walked that lonely path, tell me how you found the courage to pick up the pen and write the end on that chapter. Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a testament to the strength it takes to choose self-preservation. Let's remind each other that setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is the most profound and often the most difficult act of self-love. If this story touched a place in your heart, please give this video a like. It's a small signal that tells me these conversations are important, that we are not alone in our struggles. If you want to join me for more journeys back to the self, please subscribe to this channel. And if you know someone who is pouring from an empty cup, who needs to hear that it's okay to stop, please share this with them. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is pass along a lifeline. From my heart to yours, thank you for your time, your attention, and your compassion. Be gentle with yourselves. And remember, no matter what your ledger looks like today, you always have the power to start a new page.